You know, the Frères Lumière, they didn't think that they were creating a machine that would change the world of communication. They were just happy to have a little crazy tool to show in entertainment parks. Most people felt that it was silly and impossible, that it was just a technological invention.
Of course, today, when we see that film in historical documentaries, it's laughable. But it was new then, and that's what happens with us in films. Something new keeps coming along. We have to keep developing new things, new experiences, new visuals to keep the audience interested.
As the movies get to be 100 years old, it seems to me that it's not ironic, it's just sort of sweet that it's gone back basically to the appeal that it had when it was brand new.
75, 85!
The same instincts in people are still being excited by film. I mean, now it's sitting in a motion control simulator ride that makes you look like you're going down a dinosaur's mouth, but the basic appeal is the same.
A lot of people feel that the future of cinema entertainment is in events and in a new attraction that will bring people into the theaters. Some of the film formats are not really common knowledge yet. I mean, I think things like ShowScan and IMAX are not part of everyone's everyday or every week or every year cinema-going experience, but they could become.
I thought it was the best movie experience I ever had in my whole entire life.
You felt like you were there. It was wild.
We're heading toward a new branch of the movie experience being a first-person experience rather than a third-person experience.
I found myself pulling back, and I couldn't believe it because I knew it wasn't real, but it felt real sometimes.
The challenge is to make you believe in the future. That's this gigantic screen where you cannot see the seams, where it looks so absolutely perfect.
Sometime in the past year, I saw just a normal IMAX film called The Fires of Kuwait, which is really impressive. It never occurred to me that it might be interesting to tell something dramatic or fictional in this format.
IMAX is perceived like documentaries, not about stories. When I met the people at IMAX who manufacture the cameras, and they say, oh, my poor, no, that the IMAX doesn't, it's not for actors, not at all. You can't make a movie. What do you mean, making a movie in IMAX? Are you mad? We all felt that we needed to say, hey, this is a big change on those big screens. Now it's time for real movies and real stories.
It's so cinematic.
Because you're in such a hurry, and I wanted to tell me right away. Here we're setting a shot that will shoot at dusk, so we're preparing now. And what the shot is it establishes the competition between the French company that was called Aéropostale and Lufthansa, which is this plane over here. It's a shot that takes us half a day to set up. We have only 15 minutes to shoot because we shoot at dusk, and it's only 8 seconds of screen time. Minute details are going to be huge on screen. You see, this is going to be 10 feet tall. And that is 3 stories tall. And this is a building. It's almost a skyscraper. This is the typical IMAX factor. We have a window of 15 minutes, and after take 2, the film broke. And it's every day the same.
Well, let's see. It's about 4 in the afternoon, and I'm still waiting to get off the first shot. So, it's a rather slow process.
You know, my concern is the sky is becoming a little dark. Each time you have a new invention, it's always difficult to learn again. And people who are established in a business, they don't want to learn again. They want to keep things as they are.
The big problem is not the technology. The technology is ready. The technology is way ahead of what's presented to people, what people think about, what people want to present. It's all there. It's hardly been touched.
The cinema is a combination of a desire for an illusion for realism and a machinery for telling stories. And cinema is constantly sort of experimenting and producing a greater illusion of reality that will support the narratives that it's telling. Even at the birth of the cinema, when they were deciding what particular type of film to use, they were experimenting with 35 millimeter and with wide film. The real success of 35 millimeter was its viability in the marketplace. When you projected it on a screen, which was a big stage in motion picture development, it provided an image that gave you a very credible illusion of reality, and it was sharp and clear. So it emerged by, say, 1909 as the standard that everybody was using. But during the 20s, motion picture exhibition changed dramatically. one of the chief changes was the rise of the movie palace. And in the movie palace, there were from, say, 2,000 to 6,000 seats in these enormous cavernous structures. And the typical screen in these movie palaces was perhaps 20 feet by 15 feet. It was the same size screen that existed in small neighborhood theaters. So it was thought that why couldn't we have an image that would be commensurate with the space, that would provide spectators with something more spectacular?
The one I remember most, because it was really very, very terribly effective, is Wings. It was a long picture and had an intermission. Up to the intermission, it was just a normal black and white picture. After the intermission, people settle down and you begin to hear a noise. It was a noise of airplane motors warming up. And then the curtain slowly parted, and as the curtain parted, you could see the airplanes beginning, and that was where the noise was coming from, but it went on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And we were on that huge, huge, huge screen. Everybody in the audience oohed and awed.
There was a tremendous interest on the part of certain members of the film industry in the United States especially to establish a new wide film standard. And this was taking place at the same time that there was a transition to sound.
All day long. You like that slapping business?
Many of the studios experienced great chaotic upheavals because of the transition to sound and color. So they thought that the best procedure would be for them to go slowly with widescreen.
Around 1930, you had several 70-millimeter films made. A very famous one is the Raoul Walsh film, The Big Trail, which was actually John Wayne's first big starring film.
Looks like crows and Cheyennes, Zeke.
At a time of economic difficulties in the country, it was perhaps an effort to attract people with a special visual technique. It didn't take. It was a flop. The 70-millimeter process didn't stick around, and John Wayne was relegated back to B-Westerns for another decade.
There we go. Huh. I guess we was just a little too much for him.
The studios quickly realized that they did not need additional technological innovations to hold their audience. They got together and made an agreement that they would not make widescreen films until one standard had won out.
But in a way, the image wasn't different enough. It was not really widescreen. It was a tall, very tall image. I've seen The Big Trail projected the way, and spectacular, but it's not the same thing as seeing a very, very wide image the way you would see in the 50s.
Of an entirely new medium, which we believe is going to revolutionize the technique of motion picture storytelling. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cinerama.
Cinerama was a new kind of filmmaking and film-going experience that comes out of a background of World's Fair presentations. Unlike narrow-screen motion picture entertainment, in which people sat and looked as if looking through a window, Cinerama engulfed audiences.
Right after the war, 1946 was the biggest box office year in the history of cinema, and then it started plummeting. And there are a lot of sociological reasons for that. People beginning families, soldiers coming back, and after the big dating splurge right after the war, everyone sort of went out to the suburbs and started settling down.
When more time was available, people decided they wanted to go on vacations. They wanted to go fishing for a weekend. They wanted to work in their garden all day. And these other activities drew people away from this traditional movie-going habit. Cinerama addressed some of these desires that audiences had for more participatory kinds of entertainment.
Everyone in my family got in the car, and it was a big snowy night, and we went downtown Detroit to a Cinerama theater where the screen was kind of rounded around us, and it was a big deal.
Cinerama was, for the first 5 or 6 features, solely used for making documentaries. Hollywood thought about ways of adapting it, and it was eventually used in the early 60s by MGM to make 2 films in Cinerama that were narrative features.
How the West Was Won not only will startle you with adventure on an epic scale, but it will bring you the glorious frontier as has never before been possible in a motion picture.
There were problems, however, with the Cinerama as a kind of narrative format, and those problems relate to the technology itself.
I got really into that movie, except for they kept trying to hide your seams in like trees and poles and stuff. It was extremely distracting because of the lines in it, because basically it was a 3-windowed thing.
It was always a ride between the images, which destroyed the effect, although it still is, I think, stunning. It is not really satisfactory. It had to be perfect or it didn't work at all. And it was almost never perfect.
So the kind of invisibility of classical Hollywood cinema, which you don't really see the technology, was always a problem for Cinerama, because with Cinerama, the visibility of the technology interfered with the narrative illusion. But it produced what is called a peripheral 3D effect. And this launched a new era of 3D processes.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Richard Carlson. I'm sure you'd all like to know something about the new entertainment miracle, Third Dimension, what it is, what it does. Well, the best way I can describe it to you is to tell you that it makes the screen absolutely real and alive.
Things were very slow in Hollywood, and this friend of mine, a former cameraman who was something of an inventor, was playing with 3D. And it was interesting, but it was uncommercial. And this got me interested in it. It was a neighborhood of 3 years. We were making tests and showing it to everybody. And finally, when we just covered everything, we decided it was time to get all the critics in. There wasn't a remark about the possibilities or anything like that. There was only one question from any of them, and that was, who's going to make what picture when? So we started Born a Devil. And before the first week was up, they found out that Arch only had another $15,000. He didn't have any more money. Bob Stack, whose mother was a big socialite, came from a wealthy family. She put money into it. Bob put money into it. Some little theater man down Long Beach put money into it. And we finally got it made with, we say in Hollywood, with a spit and baling wire.
Come for us now.
Go
devil, you! F-Bobby, you devil, you! We had the big opening. Everybody in town was there. They had the whole police department out and ushering our cars in and everything. Jack won a devil, I think the first week. And he had to have 3D, that's all. But he thought of it as a gimmick for little quick money, you know?
I was knocking on his door for years, to do a 3D film. So I said, go ahead, do the damn thing.
Only in Hollywood would they have a director that was blind in one eye do a 3D picture.
There were 3D films made in just about every genre. Perhaps the most successful ones were horror films where the fright aspect of 3D could be employed normally within the context of the story. But most of the effects of 3D just had to do with shock effects, bouncing balls, you know, coming into the audience.
See the world in wax and improve your mind. See the Chamber of Horrors and scare yourself out of a year's growth.
You also had westerns, I mean, where burning spears could go floating off into the audience. And then, of course, Kiss Me, Kate was a musical. Dial M for Murder was a suspense film with a couple of shots, again, very artfully designed to, you know, like the scissors coming into the frame.
It was a picture called Man in the Dark, which was one of the very first 3D movies. And they advertised the 3D roller coaster ride. And this was supposed to be, wow, a 3D roller coaster ride. Only it turned out to be, you know, actors in front of rear screen projections. And it was very disappointing because it wasn't in 3D at all.
3D had a tremendous novelty value initially. That's all that it ever was. It never became a dramatically sound technique.
The two-projector system is still by far the best, you know, kind of 3D, but it's very cumbersome. Two different prints, two different lenses when you shoot the picture, and it just ended up becoming a dinosaur. The theater owners were happy to not have to install the complicated two-projector system, and people were just as happy to not have to wear the glasses. And when CinemaScope came out, it was advertised as 3D without glasses.
CinemaScope was the product of an old technology that had originally been developed by Henri Chrétien. Henri Chrétien, who was a professor of optics in France during the 20s, had been experimenting with all sorts of optical technology. In 1926, he went to Abulgans's Napoleon and saw this triptych of the three images side by side in the spectacular scenes. He realized that he could adapt his lens to film panoramic views.
20th Century Fox found this technology in France and decided to bring it in, and they decided to shoot most of their pictures in CinemaScope. It was a way of showing a widescreen image, but without the three projectors of Cinerama, and it also gave an image in depth.
Ladies and gentlemen, this break in our motion picture is made out of respect for the TV fans in our audience. We want all you TV fans to feel at home and not forget the thrill you get watching television on your big 21-inch screens. I have a 21-inch screen myself, and it's loads of fun.
All these technologies were basically coming to the fore because of television. Everybody wanted to find something different. If there was no television, I don't think there would have been much impetus to bring back widescreen.
There was always, the public could make up their mind, do they have to have the little screen at home to have the cinema, or do they go to the theater to see the picture? And so that is when Zanuck thought about getting any kind of a new things to bring it.
In my opinion, CinemaScope is the most remarkable development in the world of entertainment in the last 20 years. Every picture we produce henceforth will be filmed in this revolutionary CinemaScope process.
I saw the first CinemaScope film in America. I saw The Robe in this tiny little cracker box theater in Bowling Green, Kentucky, the little town I grew up in. The image was unbelievable. They had costumes, they had Victor Mature walking along through this Roman gladiator type stuff. It was sensational. It was very different than the kind of movies I'd seen before.
CinemaScope was really a pain in the ass. We had to kind of imagine, the cameraman had to imagine that you were in or you are not. And so he had to look on top of the camera with another finder, you know, to find out the action.
Mr. Hanley's from Dallas, Texas. Oh, really? In the...
So I used to ask him sometimes, when is Bill Powell going to come on the screen? Let me know.
My stock is white-faced Hereford, Pole.
We say, what do you mean, come in? He has been on the screen all this time.
I see. Are you sure you won't sit down for just a little while?
You see the place, you slide under her, focus to her. Let me just watch it once. Composing for anamorphic used to be very difficult because you couldn't really tell what you were going to get. Nowadays, if you shoot with Panavision equipment, when you look through the camera, they actually show you what it's going to look like. This allows you to put lots of people in it, lots of scope in it. Very nice, one more. But you can also isolate one face in a Panavision frame and have lots of empty space beside it.
One of the things you had to get used to was the height problem. You did not have the height of the old system. So you just had to work your way around that, and that's always been a problem with most widescreen processes.
Fritz Lang's famous comment was that scope was good for snakes and funerals, but nothing else. Some directors, like Orson Welles and William Wyler, were already using the very static image and the direction within the frame, which was simply continued, but sort of more imposed. Once you had the widescreen format, a very unimaginative director could just put all his actors up on the screen and behave as if it was a theater stage and let them interact that way. So that's kind of the downside of it.
Well, none of this concerns us for the moment.
No. No, I don't want you to go to the police.
But the upside was that a very clever director could use that through imaginative blocking and so on to really create interesting new tensions within a single frame using widescreen.
Dad? This is all going too fast for me,
You better give me something. You better give me something fast.
Some directors, like Nicholas Ray, and then later on with Sergio Leone, and certainly David Lean, used the format in an incredible way by filling the very edges of the frame as well as the center so that the full canvas was used.
This, in my book, is the most cinematic of aspect ratios because most of the great art has been done in that ratio.
We haven't shooted. Do anything other than shooting?
Action!
Today, to get the public to attend a picture show, it's not enough to advertise a famous star they know. If you want to get the crowds to come around, you gotta have glorious Technicolor, breathtaking CinemaScope, and stereophonic sound.
The introduction of CinemaScope made audiences more aware of the role of technology, and suddenly technology became a selling point for cinema.
You gotta have glorious Technicolor, breathtaking CinemaScope, or
Cinerama,
VistaVision, or
Superscope, or
Tadeo, and stereophonic sound, and stereophonic sound.
Part of the movement that widescreen CinemaScope helped foster was the epic film movement, especially in the late 50s, Ben-Hur and El Cid and Lawrence of Arabia, which really gave you a visual experience that had never been provided on the cinema screen before. The technology of choice for these films was 70 millimeter, which gave you a tremendous resolution, a tremendous canvas, you know, for any kind of film of that nature. And that sort of prevailed for over 10 years. I mean, from the mid to late 50s on through about 1970 was about the end of it. That was coinciding with the time when Easy Rider and a number of other very low-budget films came in, shooting on location themselves, and it just began to seem like a bit of a dinosaur. Too expensive, too cumbersome, cameras were very big, the film was very expensive, and the lighting required was different, so it kind of disappeared right at that moment.
We headed more and more toward closer angles, talking heads, narrower shots, longer focal length lenses, and the panoramas sort of went away. The studios had decided to abandon all of their new technology developments, which they'd all been working on. There was this rush toward multiplexing and smaller screens. And it was pretty much the end of 65 millimeter, 70 millimeter photography. The large screen movie format just died really shortly after 2001. Since 1889, when these experiments with 35 millimeter were perfected or begun, the motion picture industry has continued to use 35 millimeter film. But the experimentation continues to take place in large format films. Processes like IMAX and ShowScan in major cities, at tourist destinations, and in amusement parks. Fortunately for the special film formats, like ShowScan, IMAX, or whatever, these odd formats that don't fit in regular theaters, there's a business there. And the business is World's Fairs, expos, theme parks, etc. Cost a lot, projectors cost a lot, development takes years. So thank God for the cinema that we know, that there's this alternate thing that's sort of off to the side, that's not taken very seriously, that's now becoming very legitimate.
It's pretty much the way it would look. And we also simulated the sky. There's a terror.
It's hard to believe when you're in the audience that we've gotten that close and that clear of satellite shots.
This is how it really looks.
They're looking
So it's a dark ride with a simulator ride also.
And roughly how much does it cost?
It depends on what configuration you're going to put it in, the number of cars, the number of scenes. Intamin will provide it.
I will introduce Doug Trumbull and Jean-Jacques Hano, and then some questions, then a break.
In my opinion, IMAX is already the winner of a very large shakeout.
Everybody's accustomed to see an image in this little thing. Remember that the IMAX vision is this. You know, you are 1 foot from your television screen. And it's a very disorienting. People who are not used, it's very disorienting.
Well, there was a very large, successful World's Fair in Montreal, 1967. And part of that was several films that were shown on multiple screens, so you had a sort of total very big image. It was a huge success, and Graham Ferguson and I and another chap called Robert Kerr thought it'd be really interesting to try and make that work for general audiences beyond expos, but it needed some new technology to make that happen. In effect, what we did was take 70mm frame and turn the whole thing on its side so that you had the area of 3 70mm frames. Net effect of that, of course, is to just give you a huge image, very, very high resolution. The intrinsic part of it also was the fact that the projector was a new technology which was able to move that big a frame, which is in itself very difficult, but also extremely, extremely steady, so that even though you had a very big image, it didn't shake the way a normal film does, and so it gives you sort of better simulation of the real world. Just because of the enormous image size and the terrific impact that that had on audiences, subjects that ordinarily would be considered, very boring as a 16mm documentary became quite exciting and thrilling in the large format. So we found that really the museum market and specialty venues were much more interested than the feature studios were.
Knowing that there was a market for that kind of show place, even when they make marvelous nature films and so forth, they always try to include some things which involve the audience in a visceral way, which is generally not possible with a 35mm film.
A lot of people thought that there was going to be a problem using such a huge screen for telling stories. They said you'll get exhausted looking at it for more than 20 minutes, and how do you do close-ups? They will look idiotic. But in fact, none of those has really proven true.
Very often, when you want to make sure that the audience see the start of a tear, you make a close-up. Here, you would see that as well as the little trembling of the hand. When you're in front of that screen, you see every detail. The definition of what you're given to see is similar to the definition of your eyes. You're not looking at a transposition of reality. This is it.
It is for the light, so this is for Robert, it's not for the camera. He just walks through to see if the light is well balanced.
Why then, please, rehearsing.
The technology is evolving. We are given tools who are rendering reality better.
Without the camera then, Robert. And action.
There's no telling yet whether IMAX will go the route of Cinerama and sort of phase out after 10 years, or whether it will really come to embrace, where every city we'll have, you know, major IMAX cinemas that people are going to on a regular basis, and whether the films can be turned out on a regular basis, if there's a market for that, and if it is affordable. There's also the question of the intensity of the experience. Can this incredibly deep resolution image, or can the 3D IMAX be tolerated for 90 minutes or 2 hours, and do you want to watch that?
It's a very interesting experiment in the impact that 3D will have on emotionally charged situations. And I'm dying to see how the public reacts to this movie. It does not, however, go into this other turf that I'm personally interested in, which is the first-person cinema, where it's happening directly to you. The Stargate sequence in 2001 was my first experience with the whole idea that you could create a huge, extensive sequence on a giant screen that was a pure, immersive experience for the audience to have directly, not via another character, but for the audience to actually be transported through the Stargate, or whatever we want to call it, into another dimension. And it had a powerful effect on my feelings about what the cinema could be or should be to me. My partner, Richard Urisic, and I experimented with every film format ever made on the planet. We tried all these old cameras. We brought them out of mothballs. We projected images on different shapes and size screens. We tried everything. And we were very disappointed. We realized that just changing the size of the film from 35 to 70 millimeter wasn't really the answer, in our opinion, and that we were missing something, and we decided to try the one thing that we had left to last, which was to change the frame rate dramatically. We performed some very bizarre tests in a laboratory. We shot films at all different frame rates, 24, 36, 48, 60, 66, and 72 frames a second. We showed these films to individuals hooked up to electrocardiogram, electroencephalogram, galvanic skin response, electromyogram.
I know just what you're thinking.
Graphed out human physiological response to movies at different frame rates. And you could see this incredibly powerful bell-shaped curve that reached its peak of physiological stimulation of around 60 to 66 frames a second. I realized that it's possible to make films, present them under the right circumstances to the point where the audience no longer sees it as film, the audience thinks it's real. And that's what gave birth to ShowScan.
The main thrust that we were trying to do with ShowScan when I was working on it was to have the audience feel that they were not watching a film or any kind of movie production, that these people were alive and actually appearing on the stage.
Today, instead of our scheduled film, we have the pleasure of a scientific presentation by the film's leading actor in person.
And one of the ways we fool the audience a bit or lead them into this is putting a scrim up in front of the action and saying to the audience, this is a scrim.
Well, you're probably wondering what we're doing behind this screen, huh? Well, I'll tell you about that in a minute.
And it has an absolute effect that is really a scrim being pushed out into the audience. The whole idea was that what you're looking at is life-size and real people. And the image is so clear and sharp that you have a feeling that you really are watching people.
Let's see what this baby can do, huh? Push the red button. Uh-huh. Activate phaser. All right. Oh, now we're having some fun, huh?
Frank Yablans, who was running Paramount Pictures at the time, and Charlie Bludorn, who was the chairman of the board of Gulf and Western, who owned Paramount Pictures, saw my first demo film. I said, God, we have to make a movie. You know, this is incredible. But Mr. Bludorn said, I'd like to make a movie that's partly normal and partly in show scan, so that we'll be telegraphing to the audience what the difference is. I said, okay, I'll do that. I went back and shortly found this original screenplay called the George Dunlap Tapes, which we converted into Brainstorm, with the idea that every time the character puts on the helmet to sort of go into this virtual space, the screen would become show scan. Unfortunately, Frankie Blondes left the studio, Charlie Bludorn died, management changed, and there was no consensus to do this anymore. There was a lot of fear and anxiety about changing film formats or requiring new projectors or changed cameras, and I could never get Brainstorm done in show scan. And so it was after Brainstorm that I started really seriously recognizing that my desire for the big screen cinema, for changes in the nature of what the cinematic experience could be, was not going to happen in the Hollywood box, and that I decided to, for better or for worse, exit that scene and raise my shingle as a specialist in these weird format productions for theme parks and World's Fairs. Ever since 2001, I've been hunting for this way to put the audience into a first-person experience. Say, you're not going to experience this effect or this moment or this emotional situation or whatever it is by empathy with another person. You're going to directly experience this for yourself.
Gentlemen, your show start, 5 seconds.
Don't forget, when you see Biff and the DeLorean accelerate to 88 miles per hour and bump him. Accelerating now to 55 miles per hour, 65, 75, 85,
The fact that the image is not just on a movie screen, the image completely fills your peripheral vision, and the motion of the ride and the sound all perfectly coordinates to throw you through the proscenium arch. You have now entered onto the stage. You're no longer looking at a movie, you're in the movie. And that's the pivotal event for me in the Back to the Future ride, is that we finally crossed that threshold.
Not only did you catch Biff and save the universe, but you proved the Mornay's invention is a success. Go forth, time travelers, and remember the future is what you think.
I think what we're going to see in the future are theaters that are somewhat simulation type setups, where you have images that are really high bandwidth, like an IMAX type presentation. You'll also have simulation where the seats will move and the sound system will be outrageous, and you'll be actually in the movie as opposed to watching it. And those are the things I think that are exciting to me, and that's why playing in simulation to me is kind of dancing with the new technology out there and what will be in the future.
If you take something like a simulator ride as a component of a film experience. There's kind of two ways to approach it. One is the big thrill deal, where you're in the jet plane or you're in the rocket ship or what have you, and most of the first films really exploit that. But there is a film that was made quite a long time ago about gliding in IMAX. The movement is very gentle. You could use a simulator for that, and it just gives the audience a little bit of a feeling that, it's more than just an image. There's some real kinesthetic body stuff involved.
I think there's a way that you can incorporate the ride film. And I think in the future it will be incorporated into the system, and people will learn to understand what a POV is versus, an objective camera, things like that. So you'll be able to go from subjective to objective within a film and not be bumped by it.
Very sharp big screen. That's the future. For sure, this is the effort of theatrical release. The other effort is, of course, digital images. That's the other future. The two together will make great show for tomorrow.
Relax. It's only a movie.
And I think digital technology and computer graphics are basically playing a huge role. Jurassic Park is probably the best example that we've seen in the last couple of years where they've played a major role. It is more or less the star of the show.
The people in the foreground are shot on green screen, and then what I'm able to do is extract, looking at that green, I could take them off this background and put them onto another background. This rocket is about 5 feet tall, this one's about 10 feet tall, and then these towers here are about 20 feet tall.
The problem with this shot, as shot, was that the background was very out of focus, very soft. It turns out, here's a sample of the sharp background. They luckily shot a version of the scene where Arnold and Jamie Lee walked out of the way, and we got a nice clean version of the ocean in the background. What we did then was that we took, from this shot, we took Arnold and Jamie Lee and we cut them out. Here they are against black, and then we could composite them over the top of this clean background. The final scene plays like this. One of the things we did is we put clouds in the background here, and you can see a vapor ring kind of animating off the top of that. These clouds were computer generated, just like the nuclear bomb, actually.
It used to be in opticals when we did things photographically, photochemically. The term was, flop it, crop it, or drop it. But now you can do almost anything since you can tickle every little bit. You can get in there and adjust all the pixels.
Westerners have this sense of, within our culture, is that I saw it with my own eyes. And if I saw it, therefore it must be, right? And that's just not the case, because we will be able to show people things that are absolutely believable that are not true at all. i.e. in True Lies, Arnold Schwarzenegger did not fly Harrier jump jets, but I think most everybody that walked out of the film after seeing True Lies absolutely believed he did.
I find it fascinating that more and more I'm seeing movies called A Great Ride of a Movie. It's a fascinating commentary on what reviewers are saying and what the public seems to want.
Actually, right now, the biggest project we have in-house, which I can't talk about because I'm under a non-disclosure, is a theme park filmed attraction using very large format film in a very unique way. And we will be applying computer technology and computer imaging to that process. And the epic film, the Jim Cameron films of the future, you know, who knows? Maybe it's 60 frames per second, 15 perf, with some sort of simulation experience as well.
If you want to look at the beginnings of cinema and perhaps look at Lumière and Méliès, I mean, Lumière was going out and shooting things like The Train and other things that were actually out in the real world. And then you had the, very quickly being born, the cinema of fantasy and fantastic effect that Méliès was indulging in. So I think there is that duality going on throughout the history of cinema. And I think, well, with this cinema of attraction, it remains to be seen whether that can really be put to narrative use or whether it's just going to be there to basically give audiences the kind of kick that they had when they first went to Lumière film. As the technology of the home and of video and of television screens gets bigger and permits, you know, larger screens, wider screens, better sound, and so on at home, I think the cinema frontier has to be pushed yet again. It's partly an effort to regain the sanctity, if you will, of the pure cinema-going experience. And that's why people, I think, are looking once again at these technologies as a way to do that.
I think as long as there's technology, the movies are going to continue to evolve and change. I mean, if they find a way to project them on the inside of your eyelids, believe me, somebody's going to do it. Movies are technology. I mean, movies, when they started, they were technology. It was like an evolving thing. Look, we plug this in and something happens. We didn't used to be able to plug anything in. Now we can, and now we can do this. And as long as we can still plug things in, we're going to constantly be changing it. And people are going to want to see what's the new thing. What are we doing now that's different?
You made it through. You're the first to come through alive in a long time. You want to try it again?